you have to stick to your guns. You have to find something that you can do that maybe other people couldn't do.
I mean, for me, the only sincerity in filmmaking is to make a film that you would want to go see yourself. Because every film you want to be challenging yourself, you want to do something different. For me, cinematically, what the spy film always allowed was the idea of international travel, the idea of the glamour, being able to go places in the cinema that you'd never be able to go in real life.
The idea that has always fascinated me about dreams is the realization that everything within that dream is created by your own mind.
I think you have to be true to your own passion and your own sense of what excites you as a storyteller. I think really the only useful advice I ever got in terms of, trying to figure out your way into the film business, the film industry, is to get yourself a script and hang on to it. It's that idea, that screenplay, that concept, whatever that's going to be, that's so important. And you have to stick to your guns. You have to find something that you can do that maybe other people couldn't do. And even if that seems different or doesn't fit into people's expectations, that's what's going to distinguish it if you can do it successfully. So I think it's really about sticking to your guns and, doing something that you passionately believe in rather than trying to appeal to some desire that you imagine other people have for what they want to see in a film. I think you have to be true to your own passion and your own sense of what excites you as a storyteller. You have to play to your strengths. You have to do something that really excites you, and whatever's different about that. And in the case of following the non-linear structure was a somewhat unusual choice. But it's those things that are the strength of the project. It's the things that you can bring to what you're doing or bring to the filmmaking craft that maybe not everybody else is doing, maybe not everybody else can do or has thought to do. That's what's going to distinguish the thing. So it might seem in some ways more difficult or seem like something that would make the project more difficult to sell when it's finished, what have you. But for me, I think the answer was definitely to try to play to my strengths and the things that I personally was passionate about.
But very much at the time, I felt very young and very inexperienced, and I felt that my own life and the things I saw in the world were not going to be of interest to people. But they felt interesting to me, and so I was looking for a language, I was looking for a genre in which I could take things that I was interested in and make them accessible, make them interesting to other people. And I think that the crime genre, the film noir genre, I think that's the way it works. It's characters are defined through action, double cross, things they're doing to each other, your particular fears about whatever it is, your life, your relationships, whatever those things are. The best film noir has always been very firmly founded on those relatable fears.
I think working in films today, it's an era where people tend to watch films more than once, even if they don't like them. You'll see it in the cinema on its first release perhaps, and then you'll see it on cable television, you'll watch it on an airplane or on a hotel room or something, or it winds up eventually on regular TV. And so I think my generation of filmmakers understood really there's a responsibility to try and make something that has layers, something that has more to it the second time you see it, or some different aspect to it. And I chose to take the path of incorporating that desire for a layered approach into the narrative itself, into the story, if you like. And so I've made films that have some ambiguity to them or some layering to them narratively, so that if you see them a second time, you're going to watch them in a slightly different way. That was my approach. There are other filmmakers who approach it from a purely visual point of view, where they would just create very dense visuals that would sustain multiple viewings because you'd sort of see more in the frame.
And so the structure I settled on is one that it's based on a musical structure called the shepherd tone, which is a musical illusion whereby you can keep climbing up the scale. It's something I'd used in my scores, like the David Julian score for The Prestige was the first time we experimented with it. So you're continually going up the scale, but you never seem to go out of reach, if you like. And I wanted to try and apply that to screenwriting, to a narrative, and say, okay, with this story, can you braid together the three storylines in such a way that you create the idea of a continuing rise in intensity narratively? And sustaining that is the challenge of the structure and the way in which I approach different or complex structures, as I have in the past, and I do with this film, is you diagram it, you get a hold of it mathematically so you know exactly what it's meant to be doing. But then you sit down and you write the script from page one right through to the end of the film, the way the audience is going to be receiving that information. The hope is that in that way you're actually creating a cohesive and an organic rhythm and story movement built on a very constructed set of parameters, but not through cutting and pasting, not creating a fractured narrative so much as disparate story threads that braid together to make one coherent story.
I'm a self-taught filmmaker. I never went to film school. I never studied filmmaking in any way. I started making films when I was a kid, when I was, I think, 7 years old, making films using my dad's Super 8 camera and little action figures, doing stop motion films, a little bit of animation and a certain amount of live action. And I just carried on making films as I grew up. And over the years they got bigger, hopefully better, but more elaborate. And there never really was a period in my life where I completely stopped doing that. So I was always moving up eventually from Super 8 to 16mm films. And then I think what following represents is kind of the peak of what I was able to do on my own or just with friends, just using our own resources and borrowing equipment and sort of using the things around us to make a film.
I mean, for me, the only sincerity in filmmaking is to make a film that you would want to go see yourself, and not treat the audience as anything separate from you. Our expectations when we go to see a film are different in different genres and at different budget levels, and that doesn't mean we're dumber when we go see a bigger film, or but we do have different expectations. It's a different register of language in a sense.
I mean, I think it was Stanley Kubrick who said the best way to learn how to make a film is to make a film, and I certainly found that to be the case. I didn't go to film school, and I just have always made my own films. I started at a young age, and when you're doing films just with friends with no money, on a shoestring, you have to be able to do all the jobs, because when we made Following, for example, we were just shooting on Saturdays. We all had jobs in the week, and so not everybody would turn up, and sometimes you'd be recording sound and sometimes you'd be shooting the film, and you really had to know a bit of everything, because you didn't quite know who your crew was going to be on the day, and it's a wonderful way to learn everything. And the larger the films have become, I think the more I've been able to appreciate the learning that I did by doing. And I know enough about every job on set to sort of be a pain in the arse to everybody, just enough to not say I can do your job, but just to give them an idea that I'm paying attention to what they're doing and that I'm asking for a particular approach. And it gives you confidence as a filmmaker. I recommend it to any young filmmaker starting out, is just try everything. Try recording sound, try shooting, try lighting, try a bit of everything, except maybe acting. But if you can get your head around all those different disciplines, you don't feel quite so at the mercy of your crew. And there's an interesting relationship as a director between yourself and the people who work for you on set, which is they're looking to you for leadership and guidance. And I think they also want to feel like you care about their job. And I think one of the ways of showing somebody that you care about their job, is to know about it and be able to engage in a conversation with the sound department about microphones and which microphones they're using and things like that.
I've always found dreams to be a very inspiring part of my life. I think the idea that has always fascinated me about dreams is the realization that everything within that dream is created by your own mind as you experience it. And it's that peculiar relationship between the creative part of imagining a world, imagining someone talking to you, and then the realization that as you absorb that world, you're not aware of the fact that you've actually created it. So if you're talking to somebody in a dream, you're supplying both halves of that conversation, but you seem to be experiencing just from one half. And I think that what that says about the potential of the human mind is quite extraordinary. And Inception is intended to be a film that tries to explore the exciting possibilities of what that says about the human mind and the infinite potential of the human mind.
It wasn't conscious on my part to have another script sort of ready to go by the time we went to film festivals with Following. While we were finishing up the cut on it and doing very long, slow technical finishing, which when you have no money takes forever because you're sort of waiting for the lab to have a run the 16mm bath, whatever it is. In that time, I was putting together the script for Memento, and so also in the time it took to get Following noticed on the festival circuit and sort of get out there, I had actually finished the script. And in retrospect, it was a massive advantage because I was able to say, okay, you like that film, this is what I want to do next. Because in your best case scenario of what can happen to you with putting a film out there and it's getting distribution, for example, you'll then ask the question, okay, well, what do you want to do next? And if you have an answer, you can use that very short window of interest that you get from people in what you've done.
I've always loved the spy genre. I grew up watching the James Bond films and, later on the Bourne films and, the Jean Le Carré and all of these great representations of espionage in fiction, and the escapist component to that, I think, is a big part of that. For me, cinematically, what the spy film always allowed was the idea of international travel, the idea of the glamour, being able to go places in the cinema that you'd never be able to go in real life, and have access to all kinds of extraordinary situations that you get to enjoy by proxy. And that's very much what we tried to bring to Tenet, but we tried to do it with an added science fiction component. We tried to do it with a concept that would allow audiences to approach this in a fresh way. For me, Tenet really is about taking the elements of spy fiction and particularly cinematic, spy fiction, and having new reason to look at them in a different way, taking them and turning them on their heads, really.
Do you ever come up with ideas when you're writing a script that even scare you in terms of not being able to pull it off?
Yeah. I mean, really that's the challenge. I mean, as a writer, I try and take my director's hat off and not be afraid and just say, I want to write the most exciting thing, the most unexpected thing I can think of for the story. And then I pick up the script again, put the director's hat back on and go, okay, how the hell am I going to do that? And that's when you know you're in a good place, because every film you want to be challenging yourself, you want to do something different.